Hi, everyone. It's State Representative Graig Meyer here to talk to my friend Jon Blum about policing, police reform, and how do we maintain public trust and address the challenges that we're seeing with police-involved shootings all at the same time. Um, Obviously, right here in North Carolina, we have become the current epicenter of this public dialogue about policing and police-involved shootings of particularly Black men, certainly men of color, people of color, not just men, because of the incident with Andrew Brown in Elizabeth City. And I'm trying to figure out what can we do at the policy level. I wanted to talk to Jon because Jon thinks about this more than anybody I know. Jon is a former police officer, now works on training police officers, thinks a lot about police reform, works on one of the governor's commissions on criminal justice. Jon, why don't you say hi, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, and then let's talk a little bit about what's happening right now.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Greg. My name is Jon Blum. I've been in law enforcement for 30 years now. I started my career in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I was a police officer there for almost 10 years. And I also worked for the North Carolina Justice Academy, developing training, curriculum, and content over the years. And probably spent the last decade or so building training materials and teaching law enforcement officers across the country on everything from report writing, use of force, hate crime investigations, peer intervention, those types of things. So live here with my wife in North Carolina with my wife and my son Riker and my daughter Remy is 7 and 3 years old. So good to be here.
Glad to have you. So you and I have talked a good bit about police reform and what's possible, what's not possible, and how big the changes need to be. And one of the points that you've made to me is that really the reforms have to be focused on how do we maintain public trust, because law enforcement doesn't work unless the public has trust in law enforcement. And it seems to me that when we see these repeated body cam videos or standby videos with law enforcement involved killings of people, public trust is heading south. How are you thinking about that right now and the importance of public trust to where we are with law enforcement?
Well, you those two words, public trust, you can't overemphasize how important that is. Law enforcement needs that to do its job effectively, and to just every aspect of it. So public trust is critical. It's the foundation for policing in general. There's no one silver bullet answer to the issues and challenges that we're faced today. My first response to that is transparency is by far what we need to have with the public. Transparency is important. What we're doing, how we do it, and when we mess up, we need to be fully transparent about that and take prompt steps to correct that. So transparency is the first thing.
So when you think about transparency and public trust, like public means two things. Public first of all, means everybody, right? So like Black folks should trust the police, white folks should trust the police, other people of color should trust, everybody should be able to trust the police. But public also means open, and the idea of everybody has access to see it. And it seems like with a lot of these incidents, the police forces are more interested in protecting themselves than being open, because they're not treating everyone, the public, equally. And you're saying we need to switch that, because if we're going to trust police and policing is going to work, that policing has to be more transparent. That seems like a culture change. How do we get police forces to be more transparent?
Well, obviously there are public records laws and different things that allow people to gain access to that information. Law enforcement, like any other public profession, has personnel records that we need to, that we keep private for specific reasons. But I think law enforcement in general needs to be more open about how we give access and how quickly we give access to the things that we do, especially when it results in things that may erode public trust. I think that's the most important thing, is that when transparency and accountability, I think we throw those words around today like candy, but we really don't follow through. We just throw them out there. But the fact of the matter is, transparency needs to be prompt. It's something that you have to have and happen right away. With the news cycles the way they are today, I think sometimes in general that we might wait and hold on to something, believing that the public anger is going to go away, and then we can get away with maybe not sharing all of it. And I'm not just saying law enforcement in general. I think that can be a trend with any industry. But I think we need to be prompt and quickly release any information, especially when there are events that may erode public trust. We need to be prompt on releasing information, as much information as we can and as quickly as possible.
Well, clearly that's not happening in Elizabeth City, but part of that is because we have a state law that says that the police force, even the city, can't release, or the county, they can't release the body cam video unless it goes through judicial review first. We're trying, Democrats in the House, and hopefully some Republicans will join us, we're trying to change that so that the police can release it more quickly. Do you think, would that change in the law help, do you think? And then would police actually do it because they would understand that releasing it might help rather than hiding it?
I firmly believe that law enforcement agencies would release that quicker if the law allowed them to do that. I firmly believe that, because right there, to a degree, the judge has to release it, if I understand the current law correctly. But as a public information officer, for the Garner Police Department for a number of years, I always felt that it was important to get the media all the information that you possibly could as quickly as you could, because that builds trust. Silence does not build trust. Communication builds trust. And we have to communicate openly and freely and do it promptly. So that's the long answer to your question. Is I believe that if the law was changed, law enforcement would release the video quicker. Yes.
So trust is also about making and keeping commitments over time. What's the basic commitment that we should expect out of law enforcement with regards to police involved shooting?
The commitment should be improving our training, improving the way that we train our officers, both at the basic academy level, in-service training, following through with that. And then I also think that it's important that we recruit and retain the most suitable candidates for employment. And what I think, there seems to be confusion. Lots of people can be qualified for a position. It doesn't necessarily make them suitable for the job. And I think we need to find standards that identify the most suitable candidates for employment as police officers. I think we need to be looking at types of people that we hire and what we're looking for in an individual. And that includes problem solving skills, effective communication, and those types of things. I think it's time for us to have another look at who we recruit and how we recruit them.
That's a good point. Probably easier said than done, but something that has to be done in order to improve the approach in the field.
But yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to interrupt you there. In situations like this, it's very hard to recruit. When I actually entered the law enforcement profession was in 1991, which seems like forever ago, but it was actually, excuse me, COVID. That's my dog Parker. It was in the wake of Rodney King, and back then it was very difficult to find police officers because it was a challenging time. And when I look back at the Rodney King situation, I do believe we have come further along. If you remember with Rodney King, the officers in that particular situation, they were initially, it took longer to charge them. And we went through the trial and all of those things, and they were found not guilty. Things are improving, but definitely not fast enough. And I think we need to go to do it faster. Progress tends to roll like a brick. And we it doesn't always happen fast, but I think with public trust and public input, we can move progress along much faster than we have.
I think a lot of my Black friends would say that we're not farther along than Rodney King. And I think it's important that you and I sitting here as white guys are talking about this, because it can't be an issue that only Black people address or try to solve. I know you agree with that. You shared interesting perspective with me about how police officers, including white police officers, think that all of these cases are aberrations because they don't police like that. They've never had an incident like that that's happened to them. But you're also trying to reform and get people to think more progressively about policing, et cetera. Like, what do you think the key is to changing the culture of policing so that police officers in general, and specifically white police officers, understand that they can improve and need to improve and need to to address what certainly appears to be racial bias in policing?
Well, this is a term that, it gets thrown around a lot too, is about bias. And it's about recognizing your own biases and how that works. And to your point, it's hard for me to understand what the African-American community is going through. I can't understand it. And that as a police officer, I know in my heart that I didn't, and most police officers, white, black, men and women alike, they didn't encounter these situations, and they don't police like the situations that have unfolded. They haven't experienced that. They don't police that way. So it's easy for them in their own bias to dismiss that it's going on. So their own bias is, well, I'm not doing it, and so therefore it's not happening. It's not happening widespread. The thing we need to look at is that even when we say that, even when these isolated incidents do occur, by recognizing that if we don't do something about it, it's condoning it. Even if the majority of police officers are hardworking, dedicated, loyal public servants, and I firmly believe that they are, if we don't step up and do something about it and we dismiss it because of our own bias, we're not fixing the problem.
How do we get more police officers to agree that they need to step up and do something about it?
That's the $1 million question. I think it we come right back to there's no silver bullet. We need to look at the people who we're hiring, recruitment, retention, training, and those things. I think it starts at the ground and the grassroots level. It's the people that we're bringing into the profession. I think that's where it starts. I personally am hopeful with the next generation of law enforcement officers that are coming in, the millennials. I really believe that they take a different approach to the way policing has been done over the years. They look at things differently. They are more tolerant, and they embrace change and progress a little bit more, I think, than their predecessors did, including my generation. So I am hopeful that things are going to change. We want to see them change faster.
Yeah, I think the community does too. And I appreciate the fact that you are working in the field to try and bring about that change. Obviously, it takes a culture change, which is what you have to work on. It takes a legal change and us getting better policies and the right approach to funding what type of policing we need, which is what I'm trying to work on. I hope that everybody who's viewing, if you've got ideas of what you think we can change at the legislative level or what can be changed in your local community through your sheriff or your town council or whatever mechanism it is, I hope you'll share some ideas in the chat. Jon, thanks for joining me today. Any last words you want to share?
For anybody who wants to see improvements, reach out to your law enforcement chief, to your sheriff, talk with them, go see what they're doing. Really, and just sit down and talk with them about what your concerns are. Express that, tell them what you want to do, because every law enforcement community, the expectations of every community is different for its law enforcement agency. What the expectations are in Chapel Hill are different than they are in Raleigh. So you can't necessarily compare those two because the community has different expectations. So it's important for everybody in their communities to reach out to their specific jurisdiction, their chief, their sheriff, and tell them what they expect and to communicate that openly. We're listening. I think we're probably listening now more than we ever have, and strike while the iron's hot. Absolutely. And keep doing it. If we don't keep talking about it and keep pushing the envelope, we won't progress. So we have to keep moving forward.
Jon, I love that call to action. I think if people are watching and they're talking about policing right now, your call to action is you should be talking to policing agencies. Reach out to your sheriff, reach out to your local police department. They are community-based agencies, and like all human beings, they're responsive to what they hear from other people. So that's a great call to action, to go ahead and talk directly to law enforcement in your area about what you want to see happen or see change. Jon Blum, thanks for joining me. Everybody who watched, thanks for joining. We're going to follow up this video with the second video this week with James Galliard, one of my colleagues in the House, who is the primary sponsor on our big criminal justice reform omnibus bill, to talk about what we're proposing needs to get done at the state policy level. Jon, thanks for being here. Audience, thanks for watching. See you all again soon.